the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, the USA Today NFL Wire site that covers, yes, of course, your Arizona Cardinals. With me in this show, episode 475, recording on a Thursday night, is Seth Cox, my co-host from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, the SB Nation Arizona Cardinals site, and he is also one of the hosts of the original Draft Breakdown podcast. Seth, it is our preview, picks, predictions, and prop bets show as we are in week 7. This is an interesting week, right? Because it's not gonna happen, but Kyler Murray's on his way back, and that's not really what we're talking about this show. There is a part of me that would like the Cardinals to activate him this week and to give him make him start. He starts at quarterback and gets 2 series like in the preseason, then before turning it over to Josh Dobbs. There's a part of me that would love to see that happen. I don't think it's going to happen. Jonathan Gannon all but said that Kyler's not playing. Well, he's definitely not starting, but being said that Dobbs bouncing back, I say he's gonna come back and he's gonna play well against Seattle. If he's saying that Dobbs is playing, that means he's starting. But the fact that the clock has started officially, I'm excited. But that's not what we're gonna talk about, Seth. But how excited are you? Has anything changed? You get Buddha designated for return. You've got Kyler designated to return. Does it feel like to you that we're moving into kind of the next phase?
Yeah, it does, and it feels like you said. It's exciting. It is kind of what we were hoping to get to. We knew it wasn't going to be sooner, but we also knew it wasn't going to be later, barring any setbacks. So it was just a continuation of waiting. And that was kind of the worst part, because I feel like both you and I knew that there was more and better coming, but it just feels like it was taking so long to get there. And like you said, it's still not here, but the light's kind of at the end of the tunnel finally, right?
Yeah, and that's where we're at. Seattle week on the road against the Seahawks, who are 3-2, have already had their bye, played the Cincinnati Bengals last weekend, and we're the second team after the Bengals found themselves. It was an ugly game, but the Bengals came away with a 17-13 win. In this edition of the show, this is our preview predictions and prop bets show, which means we're going to go over. We're going to look ahead. We're going to look at the Seattle Seahawks. We're going to talk about keys and matchups that we're looking forward to, and then we're going to make our predictions and talk about prop bets. And I do have a third show lined up, so the bonus episode. I wasn't able to get one lined up last week, but Tim Weaver, Seahawks Wire managing editor, I will have that show dropping on Saturday morning, and so you'll get our preview, and then you also get a preview from the perspective and predictions from the other side of the opponent's side. So Seth, let's get started with the Seahawks, a team that is 3-2. And you looked at what they did last year, because they surprised everyone last year, although they did fade. This is, although I'm not sure, as I look at this team and look over the games that they played, I'm not sure exactly what the team is per se, because they've had inconsistencies on both sides of the ball. But if there's anything we know about that, they are and will be in the playoff hunt, it feels like, all year, because they have some good offensive play, they have some good defensive play, and then sometimes they're bad on both sides of the ball.
Well, and it's really interesting because I don't know how to explain it. I mean, the easy way is they're a complete 180 from what they were last year defensively, which is baffling. The more fun way to put it is they're like the wrong way mirror of what they were last year. I mean, you look last year, this is a team that couldn't stop you and I running the football. They were 30th, I believe, in yards allowed, 26th in yards per. I mean, they almost allowed 5 yards per carry last year. They were so bad against the run, and then they were slightly better than average against the pass. I mean, 15th in net yard per average, 13th in yards allowed, 10th, and then they had a bunch of interceptions. And then this year, it's completely flipped. It's literally the polar opposite. They are 5th in yards, 1st in yards allowed, rushing 3.2 yards per carry, and 28th in yards allowed in passing. Like, what is going on? And then, you look at their offense. Geno's obviously regressed after a career year.
Well, right. And he looks closer. I guess it's not like he fell off in the second half last year. He did. And he's looking more like, he's not looking like, star, but he's also still looks like a starting quarterback.
Well, and he looks, I mean, it's one of those situations where you look at him from a raw number standpoint, obviously, versus Josh Dobbs. And quite frankly, Dobbs has probably been just as good, right? Like, again, from a raw number standpoint, 1,215 yards for Dobbs. Geno's at 1,172. Obviously, one less game played, as Jess alluded to. But, you and I kind of take that first game from Dobbs with a grain of salt, right? Like, that was 10-day, 6 practices, and then he came in. But he's the one thing he's still doing, the one thing that has crossed over to this year is he's not turning the ball over. And the way you can, identify that as somebody, is his interception percentage is still less than 2%. He's at 1.8%. He was at 1.9% last year. So
by the way, that's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. And so he's not at 30 touchdowns last year, again, 5 games, but he's only on pace for 17 touchdowns this year. I mean, that's a huge regression from 30. Like you said, kind of more in line with what he was doing in his early career with the Jets, where he was at, 12, 13 in those 13 games. But, he's still completing a high percentage, just under 68% of his passes. It's just not the same way. His yards per attempt is down. His average yards per attempt is down. His yards per game, obviously, down. His quarterback ratings down. His QBR is down. It's just everything across. But you know what's crazy? He's on pace to be sacked less. Like, it's just, there's something that hasn't been right with Seattle this year offensively. And they get the Cardinals this week, so they probably get a chance to get better, right?
As we've talked about, we mentioned in the other show, DK Metcalf isn't practiced a couple of days, so that means start Tyler Lockett, right? Start Tyler Lockett.
And watch out for Jackson Smith and Jigba to have his first, big game of his career.
That too, especially between Jalen Thompson looking like he'll probably miss this week and Antonio Hamilton. So they might need to they better not call on me to cover anybody in the slot because, yeah. But we're almost there, guys. We're almost needing me to play in the slot, and that's a bad idea. You've got Ken Walker with 345 rushing yards, averaging 4.2 per carry through 5 games.
Well, and that's the other crazy thing is, you look at, again, their last year, and it's easy to compare and then try to pick, but it's like, Kenneth Walker last year averaged near, over 4.5 yards per carry. Rashad Penny averaged over 6 yards per carry. DJ Dallas averaged over 5 yards per carry. Kenneth Walker had over 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns. This year, it's just been, again, it's not bad. Like, I don't want anybody to think I'm saying it's bad, but it's just been less explosive, less effective. It's been very kind of lethargic. It's not explosive.
Well, especially considering the fact of how good Walker was last season.
And he was fantastic.
And absolutely how great their top 2 receivers are. And if you add Smith and Jigma to that group, you are going to be hard-pressed to find a better trio of receivers than DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and then the rookie Jackson Smith and Jigma.
I think this is the craziest stat. This is, to me, the craziest stat this year. Their longest play from scrimmage is a screen to Noah Fant for 51 yards thrown by Drew Lock. So the longest play from scrimmage from their starters is 36 yards. So there's just no big plays whatsoever. Like, just nothing is getting down the field. They're not able to. And so you look at, like, last year, they had 7 players with their own long receiving or rushing longer than that. And so, like, you literally, or sorry, 8. So there's nothing explosive about this offense right now. And that is kind of where you're seeing this, is that it's just a very methodical kind of plodding. You look at their numbers, they're 14th in yards and 16th in yards given up. Like, they're just a very average team right now, and so all of that plays into how they've looked. They're still scoring well. I mean, and a lot of that comes from.
Well, that's their 3 wins they did.
Yeah.
There's 13 points. They only had 13 points each against the Bengals and the Rams in the 2 losses, and then it was 37, 24. Defensively, they started bad. They gave up 30, 31, 27, but if you look at their yards allowed, it's dropped every single week. 426, 418, 378, 248, and they lost to the Bengals, only allowing 214 total yards, but that's because they turned the ball. And Geno Smith threw a pair of interceptions last week. They had almost 400 yards of offense, and the 2 interceptions ended up being the difference. But yeah, that defense has just been, it's steadily gotten better. Now, granted, I mean, say what you want. I mean, they sort of basically, what they did, what defensively, when they got right. It was against the Giants.
Right.
It was against the Giants. And the truth is, the Bengals offensively have been, we look at that. Now, granted, they lost to the Bengals. The Bengals have looked abysmal offensively, except against the Cardinals, much like the Giants. And so,
shocking.
Yeah. So they have offensive firepower that's just hasn't clicked. They're banged up this year. They come into this game, they are banged up. They're down their rookie running back Zach Charbonnet. They're down. Well, it looks like Evan Brown will probably be out, but their entire starting offensive line is on the injury report. Although it probably looks like just the center will be out. DK's missed 2 days of practice. Don't know what that means for Seattle because he's a guy.
For him, it usually doesn't mean anything.
But
he's also been a guy that hasn't been as effective this year.
He's been the last couple. He's been banged up. His body type and style, it's starting to, as dynamic as he can be. I think it's starting to affect him. Like from the receiver position, kind of like George Kittle. Like his production's gone down. He's still a very, very good player and can do other things like in the blocking game, but his like 1,400-yard years appear to be done.
You know who DK kind of reminds me of?
Who?
David Boston.
Oh,
yeah,
very much so.
You look at that, obviously the rookie year wasn't as dynamic for David, but over 1,100 yards his second year, almost 1,600 yards, first team All-Pro his third year, and then
the freak athleticism, body type, body size. That's a good comp right there.
Yeah, and so it's just, and DK did it for 4 years. He was able to put up 4,000 yards over his first 4 years, but now you're starting to see that 337 yards in 5 games. That's just not very DK Metcalf like. Like that's just not what we're used to seeing from him. And so we'll see how it breaks down and where he ends up this season. But when he's able to play his snaps, he's still really effective. He's just not, he just hasn't been as dynamic as you would expect from a guy that looked like he was going to be, the next Calvin Johnson after his second year.
Defensively, though, and something I really like looking at here is they're not like at the top of sacks, but they've got 19 sacks. They have 10 different players that have sacks, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 who have multiple sacks. They've got Boye Mafe with 3 sacks. You've got Jaron Reed with 3 sacks, doing a fantastic job. Oh, and that run defense, they brought back Bobby Wagner. They brought back Jaron Reed. They signed Draymond Jones. That's huge. And then the fact that they got Uchenna Nwosu, who's a very underrated player as well, especially when it comes to. But yeah, they've got Mafe and Reed with 3 sacks each. They've got Draymond. They've got Nwosu. They've got Jordan Brooks and Bobby Wagner, and also Devon Witherspoon, the first-round rookie with 2 sacks each. And that's on top of, then they've got that secondary, their cornerbacks. That's a very talented group. Now, Tariq Woolen, now known as Reek Woolen, we saw how fantastic he was as a rookie. Devon Witherspoon is a stud coming out of college. Like, obviously he's still a rookie. And they're managing to do this with Jamal Adams still being useless so far.
Yeah, and it's one of those situations that they just, like you said, they have a lot of talent, and some of it's luck, right? You mentioned Tariq Woolen, a guy that was a 5th round pick. Like him turning into a really good player has helped, right? It's not something you can bank on that you get a 5th round kid that ends up being a high level starter. Julian Love, their safety, was a free agent they signed, but he was a 4th round pick by the New York Giants. He's playing really well in this defense. Obviously Quandre Diggs has been really good for them for the last couple seasons, but even a guy like Trey Brown, right? Like their secondary is a bunch of 4th, 5th round guys that have just stepped up. But like we were talking about, it's their run defense this year and how much better they're playing behind or in front of Bobby Wagner and Jordan Brooks and giving them chances. And like you said, Uchenna Nwosu is probably their best pass rusher now. And he's only got 2 sacks. I mean, I know Jaron Reed, I think, leads the team, right? And Boye Mafe is really coming into his own, but they just do a lot of different things. I mean, Devon Witherspoon's tied for 2nd on the team with 2 sacks. Like they just do a lot of different things with a lot of different players, and it creates havoc. And the interesting thing is that from a points against, they're second half of the league. I mean, 18th in points against, but like you said, their last 2 games, they've allowed less than 250 yards to the Giants and the Bengals. And it's really been, again, their ability to force turnovers. I mean, their win over the Lions only lost this year. They forced 3 turnovers. Their win over the Giants, they forced 3 turnovers. Even in their loss to Cincy, where it was a really close game, they forced a turnover. That they just didn't win the turnover battle in that game, and that's why they lost, right? And the only game that they've lost the turnover battle other than that was against the Carolina Panthers, and that's the only reason the Panthers scored 27 points, because they helped them out a little bit. So it's just one of those situations where you look at it that they're doing enough defensively, whereas you look at what the Cardinals are, we know that their defense is going to struggle, but they just can't do enough offensively to give their defense a break and help them out. And that's kind of what the issue's been, and what this game is really going to come down to.
Coming up next on the Rise Up Seattle podcast, the best Cardinals talk on the web. It's time to move to our another preview section, but this is where we talk about matchups and keys to this game. That's coming up next on Rise Up Seattle. We're back on the Rise Up Seattle podcast, best of Cardinals talk on the web. Keys and matchups. The matchups one's a little bit tough. If we can talk some matchups. The one that we're going to have to look at, obviously, is at the receiver position, because the Cardinals secondary, even if they get Budda Baker back, they're not in a happy place when it comes to their defenders. Jalen Thompson, who plays in the slot, looks like he's going to be out probably. Antonio Hamilton, their backup slot, he's missed 2 days with a groin, probably not going to be able to play. So it's going to be interesting to see what their plan is in the slot. I'm assuming Garrett Williams comes back this game, is going to have a role of some sort. If I had to guess, that we're going to see Marco and Keitrell. Although Keitrell's been limited, I'm assuming he will be good for the game, because I think they were. I'm guessing that with Keitrell, because it didn't affect him during the game, that it's one of those they're going to limit, and he'll be full on Friday. We'll find out on the injury report, probably about the time you guys hear this show. So they'll go with Marco and Keitrell, and then probably slide Keitrell inside, and then use a combo of Starling Thomas and Garrett Williams. Just probably Garrett Williams will play the dime role, I would guess, this week.
I mean, can we just fast forward until Kyler's back? Like, it's sad to say that, but you just know, especially against a team, even without, if DK doesn't play, it's just going to be so tough, man.
Right.
It's just
Tyler Lockett in the slot against, I'm guessing it'll be Keitrell. Whew. Well, and you look at Kupp, who plays in the slot. Jamar Chase played a little bit in the slot, which is what kind of got them into trouble. That's going to be a tough matchup. And then if DK plays, DK and Marco, watch out for that one. Although I think, you know what I bet? I bet Marco. I bet they both pick up 2 penalties in the game.
Right,
DK is one of the most
yeah.
penalized. He is the most penalized receiver in the NFL, and yeah, I could see chippiness on that. I bet they both get penalized at least once on each other.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting, and if they put Keitrell on DK, there might be a fist fight. So it'll be fun to watch, though, right?
Hey, yes, yeah, that'll be interesting at least. You always look at the edge production. The Seattle's left tackle Charles Kloss been pretty solid. They've got, instead of Abe Lucas, who got hurt early got hurt in the offseason, really tough for him after having a fantastic rookie year. Jake Curran is the starting right tackle, and he is a little banged up. So we're looking at those edge guys in particular. So Demikage and Gardeck against Curran.
And the Cardinals have done a fantastic job of scheming up pressure. They just don't have anybody that creates pressure, right? And that's what the issue becomes. And so they have to find a way. They have to find a way to continue to get after the quarterback, but do it be able to rush 4 because, and even 5, like that's what the problem becomes, is that too often they have to bring 5 or 6 to get pressure. And when that's happening, they just don't have good enough corners and defensive backs at all. I mean, we just kind of lightheartedly, seriously made fun of it for the last 5 minutes. But it's true. I mean, it's just unfortunately true. And they have to find a way and to win. And I just don't know if anybody's on the roster. Do you? I mean, like, there's probably nobody that's going to step up into that spot to create that consistently.
I mean, you'd hope the Ojulari can become that.
Yeah, and we talked about him a little bit earlier this week, right, on the last episode. I won't go fully into it, but it's interesting how they're slow playing him into the system.
Well, I think that is mostly because of the lack of training camp reps.
Right, so that's what I mean. He missed all of training camp, and they're basically like slow playing him.
Yeah, which is why I think it's like, even though Garrett Williams probably comes back, I imagine his role will not be large. That it will be at best dime back, which would be what Antonio Hamilton was playing before Jalen Thompson got hurt. You look at you want to see how the defensive and how the offensive interior, especially with Elijah Wilkinson. If I had to guess, because he had a neck injury pop up where he did not practice at all on Thursday, which means we could be seeing Dennis Daly in the lineup. Jaron Reed against that interior is going to be interesting to watch. And which side of the defense does Nwosu and Mafe end up lining up most of the time?
Let's take a look. Mafe is lining up. He's playing both outside linebacker spots, so he's rotating pretty steadily. 84 on the right, 74 on the left, so pretty much either side. Let's see where. So I'm guessing Nwosu's doing the same, unless he just doesn't come off the field. Nwosu 113 to 96. So yeah, it's basically
they just off.
So maybe it's a strength thing. We'd have to really break it down to see that. So maybe one of them's playing on the strong side where the tight end lines up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what I'm guessing. And like I said, we're guessing, but when it's a 50-50 split like that, or near 50-50 split like that, it probably means they're lining up to the initial strength of the defense or offense, excuse me.
Looking at potential keys, I think.
Do you think, I was going to ask you real quick.
Yeah.
I mean, because we mentioned him. He's been kind of a revelation this year in his second stint there. Do you think that the interior, especially that left guard position where Jaron Reed lines up 50% of the time, I mean, he plays both left and right defensive tackle. I'm not so much worried about Will Hernandez. I think that'll be a great battle. But when he lines up on the defensive right, the offensive left, can Elijah Wilkinson or Dennis Daly handle him? Or is this a game where, I mean, he's already got, 2 sacks on the season? Like, is this a game where he doubles the sack total?
Ooh. And he's like...
he's got 3 on the season. So, I mean, and that's nearly a career high for him. He had the one anomaly year, didn't he have? Yeah,
like
10 and a half.
10 and a half sacks. But that's so that showed what he could do. That was like Jordan Phillips. That's a very Jordan Phillips type year that he had.
And then, yeah, I mean, 1.5, 10.5, 2, 6.5, 2.5, 2.5. But he's got 3 this year. So
yeah, he does.
And so it's almost like, and I'd love to see, obviously we can go back and look now. I'd love to see what games those sacks were. Were they against the Cardinals? Because that's the 2018 Cardinals. I mean, that is a bad team. And so, like, how did that all work out? Because this is just, I mean, it's just a guy that is a very talented player, but he's just never done that. But this year he's got 3 in 5 games, and it really seems like he's going to have a game against the Cardinals based on who their talent is across from him. And by the way, he had 3 of those 10.5 sacks against the Cardinals in 2 games.
Of course he did. Of course if he did. Keys. I think key number 1, I mean, obviously we say this every week. They can't turn the ball over. They're not that good on offense to be able to survive turnovers. But the only semblance of success the Cardinals has if they start quickly. They can't just get field goals. Like you can't expect to be 9-6 at halftime. They have to score points early, and looking at Seattle's games, so they've given up 30 points twice, and they gave up 27 to Andy Dalton and the Panthers. Bryce Young was out that game, and their defense has looked tremendous, but against abysmal offenses. So,
and to be fair, that describes the Arizona Cardinals.
Yes. Well, that's it. They're abysmal in the second half. They've shown that they can be good in the first half.
I mean, the biggest thing is they can't, and we'd never like to crap on Josh Dobbs. It's not fun. But they can't get to a point where they have to turn the game over to Josh Dobbs. And that's just
without James Conner, that feels like that's going to be an impossibility.
Right. But that's just the reality. They can't need to rely. And, last week it was simple. Josh Dobbs missed 2 throws that if he hits the Cardinals probably lose that game. They probably lose that game 26, but they lose that game 26-23 or 21 or something like that.
They get the backdoor cover that
right.
that Seth was looking for.
But instead, he just misses 2. And so that's what you can't have because, like we said before, unfortunately, that's just who Josh Dobbs is. It's not a shot at Dobbs. It's not like a hateful thing at Dobbs. It's not a negative thing about Dobbs. That's just who he is. He's just not a guy that is able to make those plays consistently. And so when you're looking at it and, you go down the list, right? You look at it, they get the ball to start an 8-play, 38-yard drive that results in a 900-yard field goal or whatever it was. And that, yes. 55-yard field goal. And then they get a stop and you're like, okay, that's not bad. And then they get 40 yards, but they have to punt. Well, they get 40 yards because they miss a throw. And it's like, you just can't have that. You're not good enough. And perfection is unfair, right? Like it's just because it's not realistic. But the reality is if they don't do things perfectly, they're not good enough to miss opportunities. And so that's what the perfection is. The perfection isn't that like you have to get every block, you have to make every tackle, you have to, but when you have open opportunities, you have to hit them. And that's the key. Like you said, don't turn the ball over. Don't put your quarterback in a position where he's got to make throws that he's just not capable of making. And then when you have throws that you should be able to make, you have to hit them. You have to make those throws because that keeps you ahead of things and that allows you the opportunity to make plays. And you can look at this game against the Rams and it can be a precursor or hopefully a way to clean things up. But, you look at that second drive against the Rams, it's 3rd and 2 and Dobbs takes a 13-yard sack. 3rd and 2, and then you're in 4th and 15. He was at the LA 40. Like they're in go for it territory, and he takes a 13-yard sack. Like that's just unacceptable. And so those are, whether it's turnovers or large negative plays, that's what they can't have in this game if they just want to compete.
Yeah, they got to score. They got to protect the ball. There's one stat. Okay, this is one thing defensive that's got to change. Do you remember that the first 3 games of the season, they had 23 pass breakups or passes defense, as they like. Basically, they got their hands on 23 passes in the first 3 games of the season, which I think was second in the league. You know how many pass breakups they had in the last 3 games?
As many as you and I. Right?
One. They have one.
Oh,
because they get the one interception. They got the one interception, which counts as a pass defense. They've had one in the last 3 games. You can't do that.
And by the way,
no way to win games or have any sort of success defensively. And if you look at the last 3 games, they were just carved up with the pass game.
And even the one they got was a guy that tripped. It wasn't like they made a play on the ball. Like it was more like right place, right time. Yeah, but that goes back to the other thing of like who that we talked about earlier, who can win up front to cause I get it. Their secondary is bad. I truly understand that. But at the same time, like you gotta give your team a little something. Like you gotta bring some pressure or give them a little something. Because
it was something that was just so promising through the first 3 games, is they were flying to the ball, they were getting their hands on the football, and I guess if I haven't addressed this, they're not flying to the football with the same intensity right now.
No, and they're not. And, obviously Matthew Stafford's one of the best passers in the game. I mean, he just is. But here's the thing. 28 dropbacks. He was only pressured 10 times. That's, you're not gonna win on that. And then the crazy thing, his time to throw when he was under pressure was over 3 seconds.
Oh man.
So it was always late pressure, which means what? Somebody's getting open after 3 seconds. And so that's what the problem becomes, is that they're just not getting fast pressure. Now, again, fantastic. 18 of Stafford's attempts came out in less than 2 seconds. Like he was getting rid of the ball quickly. That's just what he and Sean McVay do. They're just fantastic at it. And a lot of it was right in the middle, short of the field, right? But when you look at it, this guy or these guys have to find a way to get pressure on the quarterback. They have to, because if they don't, then we already know they're not good in terms of coverage. But when they have to cover for 3 seconds, they're definitely not going to be good. And so that, it just comes back to pressure and creating pressure and winning with 4 or 5 guys and not having to manufacture with 6, because the sacks in situations look good, but it's not the 28 dropbacks. It's the 24 attempts that are really, really easy, right?
Yeah, it's so difficult. And it feels like if you've been listening to this season, this has been a roller coaster, because we went from, they're going to be bad, but I don't think they're going to be that bad. Oh my goodness, they're actually not that bad. Oh wait, they're bad. and in fairness, they keep losing players. And we've just been waiting for Kyler Murray to get back and all this.
But we've also known that was something that was unsustainable, right? Like,
yeah,
they were so razor thin from just an NFL talent perspective that it just didn't matter.
Well, and Geno Smith and Josh Dobbs was playing near, like, he had a couple games where he was literally playing the best you could ever expect him to play. And you can't expect him to play like that week after week. It's just not feasible.
No, and that's the reality. I mean, when you have a player I mean, and I don't want to say it's similar to Geno Smith, but it's similar in terms of just a small, just a small sample size. But Geno's regression, again, the big thing is he's not turning the ball over, but he's not making the dynamic plays he was last year. Geno's regression back to who he has been, or better, slightly better than who he has been. And then Dobbs' regression to back to who he has been. Like those things, like most players don't change in their career, right? Like they're just who they are after they have a big enough sample size. Very few guys, redefine themselves in their career. I mean, I'm trying to think of one that really, I mean, maybe Doug Flutie, like a guy that just didn't make it and kind of bounced around and then had a nice, career kind of at the tail end. But most guys don't do that. I mean,
you have to go
say
back
Kurt
a
Warner,
ways
but
to like Rich Gannon.
Gannon's a great one, but yeah, most people say Kurt Warner. It's like, no, he never got a chance. And then when he got a chance, he took advantage.
Yeah. Well, because he was great. He was great. Like he started, like he got his first playing time, MVP. Then it looked like he was wasting away, and then he got another chance, and he was great again. So, yeah, there's been a few flash in the pan type, but this is I'm going back a long time. Steve Berline, guy that was a quarterback starter for the Cardinals in the early '90s, for the Panthers ended up having a Pro Bowl year. But these are guys that have flashed the pans. Chris Chandler developed into a, he took the Falcons to the Super Bowl. But no, quarterbacks tend to be who they are, and if they flash, it's not for an entire season.
Right. And so he had that fantastic 3-game stretch, and the last 2 games have been closer to what he has been for his career. And that's why I said at the end of the day, you don't want to put this on Dobbs because he is who he is. And you've mentioned it. Can't turn the ball over, but at the same time, you can't ask him to do too much.
Right.
And those staggering fourth quarter numbers where he's just abysmal as a player in the fourth quarter, that's just unfortunately what you're going to get when you get to that situation. Like there's not going to be like, Josh Dobbs is now Tom Brady in the fourth quarter. Like, no, like he's going to be Josh Dobbs in the fourth quarter. Like he can have a good.
And it's sad. Like no James Conner is kind of the way to protect Josh Dobbs is to have a runner like James Conner, and yeah, you've got Keontae Ingram, Damon Williams, and Imari Mercado. That's not promising. That's just
no,
tough.
Not at all.
Like you might be able to piece together a running game with them, but that is different than having a James Conner finishing the game. It really is.
100. It 100% is.
Coming up next on the Rise of Seattle podcast, Mr. Cardinals Talk on the Web. Let's talk about, so let's make our predictions and prop bets to talk about. That's coming up next on Rise of Seattle. We're back on the Rise of Seattle podcast, Best Ever Cardinals Talk on the Web. What do we think is going to happen in this game? And first, let's talk prop bets, and then we'll make our predictions, I guess. And then I guess kind of what we're going to, our prop bet predictions will sort of give away what we think the final outcome will end up being. So for my best bet, like a bet to make for every team this week, and I looked into this a little bit, so I'm gonna go with the trend, especially after how they fell apart the last couple of weeks in the second half. I said take the first half money line on the Cardinals. That's been a good play. The full game money line is plus 280, but look, the Cardinals are plus 210. They're plus 210 on the first half money line. They're 4-2. They've won the first half 4 times. The Seahawks have been trailing at half. They've trailed at halftime 3 times out of their 5 games, and so I like that. The Seahawks then turn things on the second half, which jives with the Cardinals and their 98-30 second half deficit. But I do like the first half money line for the Cardinals at plus 210. Plus, that's really good money.
Yeah, and to kind of piggyback off a plus money sentiment, I really like Kenneth Walker's rushing yards, which is 71.5, I actually think you should take the alternate rushing yards, and I would be comfortable taking 120 plus rushing yards. But if you're a little nervous, take him over 100 rushing yards. It's plus 235. And the Cardinals have given up in the last.
They gave up 158 to Kyron Williams, 108 to Christian McCaffrey, and 122 to Tony Pollard in the last 4 games.
Yeah, and even Joe Mixon had 81 in that game. So, you look at it, it's probably going to be, they're probably going to be able to run the ball again at will. So I would be very comfortable with Walker over 100 plus yards.
That's a good one. They've got Dobbs at over 22.5 for the rushing. I think that is 2 weeks ago we've had that, but Dobbs in the run game is going to be necessary, especially because he does get himself out of some trouble that way. I'd say take Dobbs over the 22.5 for certain at minus 110, which is, that's a normal 50-50 type situation. But you look at the quarterback props, passing yards, I don't touch the passing yards. That's too, I don't know. It
lends itself too much to the Cardinals getting behind and then be able to run the ball. It really does. I mean, if you want to look at Dobbs' numbers in the passing game, he has over 225 in only 2 games. He barely cleared that against the Giants with 228, and then he had 257 against the 49ers. But he's been under 200 yards just as often as he's been over 200 yards. So it's not that 218.5 number is not a number that you really want to play with. That's just, Jess is right on this. Both of these numbers are sucker bets because we just don't know how game flow is going to come out and how it's going to look. And here's one that Jess and I love every week. And they're not offering it on DraftKings. So if you've got it on BetMGM, let me know.
There's no kicking props this week.
There's no kicking props this week, baby. So they've figured out the Arizona Cardinals are where bettors go to make money off of kicking props because they have been crushing. Let me ask you this one. So we talked about what they've done in terms of passing, but at the same time, the Seahawks pass defense, not been great. They've got good players. In the last 2 weeks, as you mentioned, they've really turned it on. 168 yards by the Bengals, 136 yards passing by the New York Football Giants.
But those numbers, you say, oh, those are eye-popping, but then you have to remember the context. The Giants have just been terrible except for 2 quarters against the Cardinals, and the Bengals have been terrible except for 4 quarters against the Cardinals.
And so you look at Marquise Brown's number in this game. His over-under right now is 55.5. He only had 34 last week.
Should have had a gazillion. Yards.
On 11 targets. By the way, the last 3 games, Marquise Brown has 31 targets. I get people saying trade him, but where are you going to go with the football? 31 targets is absurd. You can't trade him unless you're getting a higher than a 3rd round pick, which you probably would get in a compensatory return if he signs elsewhere. So what I wanted to ask was his 55.5. He, with the opportunities that he's had lately, would you take that, or is that too high just with what Dobbs has kind of put on the field the last couple weeks.
I'm gonna say I'd take the over on that, especially because it
feels like they're going to be throwing the ball again.
Yes, it does, and I also really like the anytime touchdown for Hollywood at plus 140 as well. Looking at like kind of the anytime scorers for the Cardinals. I think easy money is Tyler Lockett at plus 100. Tyler Lockett plus 100. I like Hollywood at plus 140, and a sneaky one is Zach Ertz at plus 200. Though bad things happen. Bad things happen when Josh Dobbs throws the ball down the field to Zach Ertz, which is why the one touchdown worked because they were inside the 10, so it wasn't a downfield throw.
Right. You might. So on these ones, especially the Lockett one, you might want to look at DraftKings. He's plus 135. I'm just going to tell you guys, plus 100 for a receiver is absurdly low. Like it's plus 135 is actually really low for a receiver because it's such hit and miss. Like running backs, Kenneth Walker's minus 185, which is
you know what he is like, on BetMGM? Minus 275.
Yeah, that is an insane number because what people don't understand is like scoring touchdowns is random. and so they're basically saying there is no way that Kenneth Walker does not score a touchdown in this game. That it's more likely that he scores a touchdown than he doesn't. So that's crazy. And his 2 touchdown number at plus 285 is typically what you see most running backs at for 1 touchdown. So like it is not intuitive to, it's just, again, like I was talking about with those passing yards, it's a sucker bet. Like this is a day where you load up and you're like, I'm just going to put all my money on Kenneth Walker to score a touchdown because it's a sure thing. And then like they go to like Colby Parkinson and Jake Bobo for touchdowns, and you're like, what? Where is all my money? So stay away.
So, but yeah, Tyler Lockett, I like plus 100. That's easy money, I think.
I love that one too.
Tyler Lockett plus 100. I like Hollywood at plus 140. I'm maybe like actually I don't trust. I cashed in on the Bengals game for the Ertz anytime touchdown at plus 275, but I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't trust it. Never mind.
First touchdown scorer, Kenneth Walker's plus 340. That's a really good one for anybody. But if you want to get freaky, Hollywood Brown's plus 1,300 first touchdown scorer.
Yeah.
And he should have been the first touchdown scorer.
He should have.
In that game.
Because he's getting open. That's the thing. Hollywood should have so many yards. He has been so open this year and just have not been able to. That they had the one connection, that one 25-yard touchdown throw against Cincinnati. And other than that, it's just been frustrating. If we're looking at, let me see, they don't have, no, it's always just tackles and assists. I think it probably, 8.5 tackles, Bobby Wagner, 8.5 tackles.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. The other interesting one on the defense special teams that we, kind of brushed over. And again, it's tough, but Jaron Reed's plus 160 to record a quarter of a sack. So I would take Jaron Reed. That's plus money. That's a good bet. The other one I would take is they don't have our man Gardeck on here. Okay. But they do have Dimakaji and Zaven Collins at pretty good plus money. Those are all bets that I like in this game. Again, it's just half a sack, so they a share of a sack. That's
here's an easy one. Mark, this is for tackles. Marco Wilson over 4.5 because he's being targeted so much.
Yeah,
like he had 5 tackles last week. He had 11. So he's passed. So he's had 5 or more tackles in 4 of 6 games this year.
Yeah, and he's is that tackles and assists or solo tackles?
Let me see.
That's for
That's
DraftKings.
tackles and assists. Tackles and assists.
Yeah. So make sure you take the right one. If you're on DraftKings, they have a solo tackle and a tackles plus assists. So just make sure you take the right one because
you can bet assist tackles on BetMGM. Who? What?
Yeah,
don't bet that ever.
You can do that
ever.
Yeah, you can do that here too. So, so I like that bet as well. I think that's a smart one.
Let me see. Anything else worth doing? So with that, let's go with the predictions. Let me hear yours, kind of how it plays out and what the final score you think it is.
Yeah, I wanted to trust one more time a backdoor cover, but it's just been so ugly the last couple games that I just don't see it. I'm taking I like Jess's bet of the first half money line. I can see like a 10-7 Cardinals lead at the half with them losing 13-28 in that game. So Seahawks win, Seahawks cover, take the under.
And
just 4.5 on DraftKings. I don't know what it is on BetMGM.
I believe it's 44.5. Oh, this full game. 44.5. The over has been friendly to the Cardinals most of the year. I do like I like the first half money line. I'm going to say they're going to lead in going into halftime 13-10. And then they will end up losing 31-20. They will have a better offensive output, but ultimately they will score one second half touchdown and then give up 3 touchdowns in the second half. 31-20 is how I have that played out. But they do go into halftime with another lead. You can cash in that money line, the first half money line, and then take the Seahawks to win, to cover, and for the over to hit in this game.
And I know this is super degenerate talk right now, but if you are a person that wagers money on these games, one of the things you want to start really paying attention to, and this is a complete anti-Cardinals thing, and I apologize ahead of time for that, but it's also a smart betting thing. You want to wait until that money line changes in-game live enough that it becomes profitable. So like right now it's minus 395. There are times when that money line will get under minus 200. When that happens, hammer it then, because the likelihood that the Cardinals are going to hold on to a win has really evaporated from Jess and I's soul at this point. And so if you're getting that money, take it.
Yeah, so take the Cardinals on the first half money line, and when they win that, when you
parlay that,
when you win that, then you go with the Seahawks money line, because that, if the Cardinals go into halftime with a lead, you probably can get you might be able, you'll definitely get the Seahawks on the final money line. It'll be something like minus 140, right? And that's a very reasonable. That's actually one that if it's minus 140 on the money line, that's one you just go in and during the week you're just like, yep, I'm betting that no matter what. It's not bad money, but it's still profitable enough. So you might be able to win. So if you can, well, I don't know if you could, maybe. Well, you could parlay the first half and the full game. It just isn't going to be nearly as profitable right now because you got plus 210 and then it's minus 350 on BetMGM. But you might have to do 2 separate bets for that because you.
And what I meant by parlay is just take that money and like let it ride, but put it on the Seahawks in the second half.
Definitely, absolutely. And with that, we'll wrap up this edition of the Rise Up Sea Red podcast, the best ever Cardinals talk on the web. This has been our preview, picks, and predictions and prop bets show. Episode 475. We will have another one drop with Seahawks Wire managing editor Tim Weaver, friend of the show now. who's come on for a couple of off-season previews. We will have that dropping on Saturday. Seth and I will be back on Tuesday to talk about, so you'll probably hear it on Wednesday, to talk about what happens in Seattle and whether or not we can expect Kyler to come back against the Ravens. That's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. Thanks for listening. As always, we'll be back very soon.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up, See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be Red, See Red, and of course, Rise Up, See Red.
Roll!